It's good, but just not quite as good as the 1990 original. Let me get this out of the way immediately. Yes, the story of the Witches 2020 remake is essentially the same as that of the 1990 original film, but there are a lot of differences in the minor details throughout the story that do essentially make it unique and different. So, in my opinion, the movie truly isn't unnecessary, and it is worth watching even though you have seen and are a big fan of the original. Now, one of the things that made the original movie so memorable was Angelica Houston's performance as the Grand High Witch. So, how does Anne Hathaway stack up? It's my opinion, not so high. She's not bad, she's not terrible, but if you're strictly gonna compare the two, Anne Hathaway doesn't quite hold up. Primarily, here's a few things. The first of all thing is the acting. Now again, I mentioned she's not bad. Anne Hathaway doesn't do a terrible job here, but she does do the overacting bit too much. I did find her European accent here funny and unique, and she pulled it off really well, but she does a whole Jim Carrey thing, sorta, with her Grand High Witch, in which everything she does is big and all of the attention has to be on her at all times when she does even the most minor things and so on. And it's just for me, especially as someone who is a big fan of the 1990 original film, I just can't help but compare these aspects of the film, and because her performance is so big and dare I say cartoony most of the time, it doesn't quite match the character in my opinion, particularly since I am already a huge fan of Angelica Houston's performance. Another reason why the Grand High Witch in this one is just not as great as in the original is because of her design. Now, the Grand High Witch is one of those iconic movie monsters of all time, and so the original 1990 movie is not some R-rated, super terrifying horror movie. No, it's actually a family-friendly movie with some horror elements, and one of the most horrific elements in the film is the Grand High Witch. She's scary and gruesome as hell, man, especially for its time, 1990. And in this one, the Grand High Witch, minor spoilers, terribly sorry, but yes, she does have a more monstrous true form, but she still mostly looks like Anne Hathaway, and I don't know if it's because of like a clause in Anne Hathaway's contract where she has to look like herself 100% of the time or whatever. But in the original, Angelica Houston just turns into an absolutely disgusting and horrifying monster. And here it's just Anne Hathaway with more teeth, So the effect isn't quite as great, and I didn't appreciate it as much. And this is all made so much more worse because of the CG in this movie. The CG in this movie is actually quite good for the most part, but I don't know, I'm turning into a terrible broken record here, and I'm terribly sorry, but I just can't compare all of these elements to the original. And yes, the special effects in the original are dated by comparison, but they were all practical effects. Makeup, prosthetics, puppetry, robotics, and all of this cool stuff. And it made everything look real. Everything moved real and everything looked real because everything was just there being shot in the camera. Here, everything moves and feels less natural. So when a witch has a snake with her, in the original, it's a real freaking snake. In here, it's clearly a CG snake, for example, and you just know. You just know immediately that it's a cartoon. It's a very well done cartoon on the actress's arm, but it doesn't have the same effect for me because it's not real, versus like in the original, it's way more terrifying and pulls you more into the story because you know that the freaking snake is there. And again, going back to the Grand High Witch, that's what made the Grand High Witch so terrifying was because all of those prosthetics and whatever makeup on her was real. And it was done incredibly well with all the lighting and how it was shot and how it was put on Angelica Houston's face and all of this. And it just made it more terrifying. Here it's just clearly CGI Anne Hathaway or whatever. And she moves in this weightlessness that we've all seen like a billion times now in CG heavy movies. And she moves in a more cartoony, more natural way. And so it doesn't have quite that effect, you know? It's less horrific because you know everything is just CG and cartoony and frankly not real. However, the good thing about making all of the effects CG in this regard is that the witches are able to pull off stunts and weird actions that just weren't possible back in the day. Because the Jim Henson Company did such a good job, an excellent job, with the special effects in the original movie, I would have liked them to carry on that spirit and made this one be a hybrid of practical effects and CG, you know, and not just everything is absolutely CG, nothing is real. So it still sort of carries that spirit from the original. You know, I would have really appreciated that. Another thing that really pulled me out of the experience of the movie was freaking Chris Rock. Yes, Chris Rock is in this movie, and he plays a sort of major role. I did not expect this from the trailer at all. I never heard or saw him or whatever in any of the trailers or promotional materials. So when I heard him, I was like, what?
Hello?
Is that Chris Rock? What? Chris Rock is the narrator of this story. There wasn't a narrator in the original, and they decided to put a narrator in this one. It's not bad. The idea of a narrator for this sort of movie is alright. But the thing is, they got freaking Chris Rock for it, and the narrator talks incredibly often. Like, every few minutes, the narrator will say a line or two. And, again, very similar to what I said about Anne Hathaway, Chris Rock doesn't do a terrible job. He's alright in this. His acting is alright. It's just that he just sounds like his voice is so undeniably Chris Rock all of the time. So, movies going on, acting is great, everything is going smoothly, story is great, as you all know if you've seen the original. And then Chris Rock talks. And it's like, what? Why is Chris Rock oh, right, Chris Rock is a narrator. So, almost every time he talked, I was like, why is Chris Rock here? Why is Chris Rock talking? And again, he's doing an alright job as a narrator. It's just that it's Chris Rock's voice, man. I can't help it. One of the things that I loved the most out of this movie was Octavia Spencer. Octavia Spencer does an incredible job as the grandmother. She puts her own unique spin on it and puts a very nice southern spin on this whole thing, because this version takes place in Alabama versus like in England in the original movie. And her southern grandma is just so heartwarming and so realistic that you just want her to be your grandma, you know? She's great. She's awesome. This is one of her best performances, in my opinion. So, because of all that, I gotta give The Witches 2020 remake a 7 out of 10. It has good special effects, although all of them are weightless and cartoony. The acting is great, although Anne Hathaway overacts way too much, and Chris Rock is just Chris Rock. And overall, yes, I very much enjoyed this. I just can't help but compare every little detail to the 1990 version because I am such a huge fan of it. This version does stand on its own, and it's again, I reiterate that it is not a waste of your time. If you have seen the original multiple times, this version of the story is its own unique thing, and I would recommend you see it at least once. Whether or not you like it better than the original is sort of up in the air, but I certainly didn't. I prefer the original 1990 version way more than this one. Although, again, this one isn't bad.
Doesn't matter who you are or what you look like, so long as somebody loves you.
You wouldn't happen to be carrying around a mouse on your person, now would you?
A mouse?
Mm-hmm.
Why on earth would I be carrying around a mouse?
And if you thought my review of The Witches 2020 remake wasn't bad, please click like down below and subscribe so you won't miss any of my awesome content. And if you saw the movie and agree or disagree with my point of view, leave me a comment down below and we can talk about it. And this has been Asian Action Actor. While you're still here, you might want to see the other movie and series reviews that I have already done on my channel.